After my last video covering top dinos for solo players, I've gotten a lot of combat guide requests for both Achillo and Zuko, so today we'll be covering Achillo's full combat guide. This guide assumes you have a baseline understanding of how combat works in Path of Titans, but we'll still be covering tips for both beginners and advanced players as we go. It also assumes you'll be playing solo or with small groups, but all of these tips will still apply in large groups. You just may want to run a different build than what I would recommend here if you consistently play in larger groups. Also, keep in mind that with any new skill, the only way you'll get better at it is by doing it yourself, so don't be discouraged if you die a few times practicing Achillo combat. Everything will eventually click. We're going to be breaking this guide down into 5 major categories: Achillo's optimal build for solo and small groups, general Achillo tips, attacking, defending, and escapability. Here is the best overall build for Achillo. We're going to briefly go over each slot and why I selected these abilities before jumping into the combat tips. For the head slot, Raptor Strikes allows for swift, offensive attacks that can shred both large and small dinos alike, if you can maintain a 5-stack. At a 5-stack, Raptor Strikes only hits for 55 damage a hit, but you can attack so fast that it has the highest DPS of any of Achillo's abilities. The default bite, at 60 damage per attack, with a longer cooldown, doesn't pack nearly enough punch to justify running. In the Census slot, either Hunter's Instinct or Lone Hunter can be used. Both have their own playstyle advantages, although I would recommend Hunter's Instinct. Hunter's Instinct boosts your movement speed by 5% when out of combat. It can prove extremely helpful when trying to catch up to prey outside of combat with its 5% speed increase, or it can conversely help you escape from players giving chase once you're out of combat. It also helps you stay more competitive with dinos that have the speed hide, as Achillo doesn't have access to the base 5% speed increase hide like most dinos do. Lone Hunter obviously gives you a flat 10% damage boost, which is also pretty strong. For the front limb slot, Claw Attack is still the go-to, even with its recent damage nerf from 90 down to 70. It'll help you defend against pesky small creatures trying to land hit and run attacks on you. It's also a great solution if you need to land hit and run attacks on a larger opponent that you're having trouble stacking Raptor Strikes on. For the hide slot, Survival of the Fittest is by far the best. With a 10% increase to movement speed while venomed or bleeding, it can give you a huge advantage to fighting otherwise semi-dangerous opponents like Steer or Kentro. Megs can also provide a practically free speed boost with their Venom because, in its current state, Venom has practically no negative impact on your stamina at all. Survival of the Fittest is an insanely good ability, and we'll talk more about why later. For the leg slots, Pounce and Ripping Kick will be your go-to. These two abilities are mostly helpful for movement, as Ripping Kick does a measly 10 damage and about 8 seconds of standing bleed. Pounce can make extremely good utility to help you safely stack Raptor Strikes if you can find an opponent over 5,000 combat weight that is relatively alone, and Pounce the back slot. If you're unfamiliar with which dinos Achillo can pounce, check out the video above where I break it all down. Obviously this is a bit more niche, so Pounce ends up more consistently functioning as a speed and distance booster. For the tail slot, Counterbalance will provide increased escapability, boasting 15% slower stamina drain while running. And for the voice slot, Panicking Sprint is by far the best pick. Not only does it reduce the attack damage of nearby dinos by 20% for 30 seconds when activated, but it also restores a whopping quarter of your stamina bar as well. Panicking Sprint can function both as an aid to escapability and a combat stamina restoration tool alike. Here are some general things you'll want to keep in mind when playing on Achillo. Number 1. Be careful or avoid initiating fights in tight or uneven terrain. It's very easy to get stuck for a second on Achillo if you hit a stump, branch, log, rock, etc., and getting stuck for even a split second could be enough to kill you. Achillo doesn't have as good a turn radius as other things around its size at full sprint like Serato, so making the quick cuts you may need to make in order to kite attacks in an area with lots of ground clutter might prove deadly. Number 2. Be very aware of when and where you drink, and be careful about standing near water. This goes for all smaller playables, and Achillo is among them. Sarcos can pick up anything 3,000 combat weight and under, so Achillo at 2,600 combat weight is a prime target. Be very careful drinking around places like the icy pond. Number 3. Don't hang around after making a kill. It's decently likely in the current Path of Titans official PvP scene that if you kill a, quote, solo player or a small group, they're actually part of a mega pack which is currently barreling in your direction. Scoop up your trophy and relocate quickly, or your problems might amplify. Unless, of course, your intent is to bait them away from their icy hidey hole. Before our first clip, I want to circle back to Survival of the Fittest. Here is a list of dinos sorted by their base run speed, and as you can see, Achillo falls down here with the likes of Dasp and Kentro. But, with Survival of the Fittest active, Achillo jumps all the way up to 1,155 speed, surpassing every dino in the game except for Campto, Alio, and Struth. This can provide a huge advantage when going on the offensive against fast dinos that cause bleed or venom, as you'll be able to catch up to and get away from them when they would normally be faster. As I mentioned earlier, venom is Achillo's best friend. Not only does venom do nothing compared to bleed, it actually doesn't even put you in combat, which means if you run out your combat timer after being venomed, Hunter's Instinct will activate, stacking with Survival of the Fittest for a whopping 15% faster movement speed, boosting Achillo all the way up to 1207.5 speed, which is faster than Campto's base speed. If you're fighting any group with Megs, try to have a Meg hit you with its default bite as soon as possible so you can use the free 10% speed increase in combat. And then when you need to escape, that 10% will turn into a 15% with Hunter's Instinct as soon as your combat timer expires. In my opinion, the easiest way to explain attack strategies is to just show them. For this section, I'll be talking through some of the fights I shot recently to give you all a better idea of the thought process behind the playstyle. Before we jump into the first clip, here are some general combat tips. Use available terrain to your advantage. Not many dinos have Achillo's jump, speed, and stamina. Learn what and when you should kite versus what and when you should tank. When fighting a tough group, pick one target and try to focus on them. It'll make for a much easier fight than constantly changing targets and spreading out your damage. Take what your opponent gives you. If they make a mistake, like jumping into water, getting stuck, or letting you tail ride, take advantage. And lastly, tailor how aggressive or reserved you play depending on how they react. Again, if they run and let you tail ride, do it. If they aggressively sprint after you, especially on something large like a Rex, let them blow their stamina before re-engaging. In this example, I saw what I thought was a lone steer in the middle of IC. A perfect 1v1 opportunity. So I entered the fight by tanking one shoulder hit to get a stack of bleed to give me that 10% movement speed boost, and then the steer tried to initiate a tail ride on me. To exit a tail ride, I love to do what I call the brake check maneuver. Basically, you let them chase you for a little bit and then slam on precise move backwards. And what usually happens is they will not react fast enough and let their momentum carry them past you, so then you can kind of reverse flip the tail ride onto them. And as you can see in this example, that's exactly what I did. He tried to pull the same maneuver on me, but I caught him in a precise move tail spin until he reversed the other way. But he let me get several free hits in during the tail spin. What he should have done here is initiate another tail ride on me, but he kind of curved off to the right and let me get back on his tail here. Apparently he was also grouped with an Amarg, which put a little bit more pressure on my side of the fight, but I saw he was getting low, so I just decided to go right in for the kill as fast as possible so I could avoid the Amarg. Now, I don't think this guy was full HP when I started the fight because he dropped pretty quickly, but it wouldn't have mattered even if he was. The same principles still apply. If they stop, try to continue to circle and stay on their tail. If they get behind you, precise move backwards and brake check them, and they will most likely shoot past you, and then you can reverse the tail ride back onto them, and repeat. This base method, obviously with situational adaptations, has proved extremely effective for me when fighting small things on Achillo. Of course, if your target is smaller and does less damage, something like a Pesky, you can afford to straight up completely face tank, if nothing else is around that might finish you off afterwards. Face tanking will actually even work for another Achillo that's not running Raptor Strikes. If they're running default bite, your DPS will way outscale theirs as you ramp up Raptor Strikes. This is an example of an Achillo that was part of a giant mega pack that just let me tail ride him to death. Here is an example where the Survival of the Fittest hide actually would have helped him immensely. You can clearly see he has a venom stack in this clip, but I'm still catching him all the same. So he definitely doesn't have that 10% movement speed increase. This guy definitely should have attempted to brake check me at least once, but he continues to let me run him down, riding his tail almost the entire way. Their Meg was able to cut me off at one point, so I just continued to stack Raptor Strikes on the Meg until I got a chance to go back at the Achillo again. And like I said earlier, if your opponent gives you a tail ride, just take it. It will be one of the easiest kills of your life, as Achillo is extremely good at tail riding and killing foes quickly. In this scenario, I had been moving my Achillo back to a home cave to get some rested bonus for easy regrowth when I stumbled upon a Pesky, Steer, and Iggy. Now, normally any three of these dinos are beatable on Achillo if you're playing careful, but since they're all clumped up together and with the really tight and unforgiving terrain of Young Grove, it definitely wouldn't be smart for me to go for all three here. So I decided to try to go for the Pesky. I knew if I engaged the group as a whole and then hopped away up onto some rocks, the Pesky might be tempted to follow me. My thought process was I could bait the Pesky out away from the group and then easily solo it on the rocks in a face tank. So I went for a pass, and then quickly escaped to some rocks so I could observe and see how they'd react. The Iggy, of course, instantly tried to climb the cliff, but the Pesky didn't seem to really want to take the 1v1, which totally makes sense. It's not really easy for a Pesky to beat an Achillo. So instantly, you can see we have one really aggressive player here, the Iggy, who is going to try to follow me wherever I go, and the other two are playing a bit more defensive and hanging back. And since the Packy wasn't really separating out from the group, my second thought was to go for quick passes, like I normally do on an Apex, and see if I could just get the kill out from underneath them. I took my first pass when I saw that he tried to jump across the small river here and actually ended up falling into it. This gave me a really easy chance to catch up to him and make a pass as I ran by. I continued to play the terrain to my advantage and take passes whenever I found an opening. The other bonus here is if you're going against groups that are a little bit less coordinated, you can have this kind of thing happen. As you can see from the bleed, the steer actually ended up hitting the Packy in that exchange. So now it's just going to be a matter of evading the other two while trying to chase down the now panicking Packy. As you can see, I'm constantly trying to use the terrain to my advantage to throw off the Iggy and the steer, but at the same time, the terrain here also makes the Iggy and the steer very difficult targets for me because it's really easy to get stuck when engaging a larger opponent in terrain like this, which is another reason I went straight for the Packy. So here the Packy makes two lethal mistakes. Instead of attempting to run and hide or stay underneath its group members, it swims across the river and gets stuck on the rocks, which enables me to land a free hit as I pass, and then turns around and swims back across the river as its aggro friends are trying to follow me going the other way. And this is where Achillo's movement abilities really start to shine. As you can see, I can easily clear the water with just my jump, and if you need it, a jump kick pounce combo can get you to go even further. After finishing the Packy, I made my first mistake of the fight. I tried to jump this set of rocks ahead to get away from the Iggy, and I got stuck. I took a few hits as I turned to leave, but I was able to keep the hits on my tail, so it didn't end up mattering that much, and I was easily able to jump back across the river, which put some distance between the Iggy and myself. And then it was just an easy hop up the rocks, and I was totally safe again. For larger opponents, like Rex, it's going to be all about kiting or baiting out attacks to create openings for you to attack. I find this to be easiest if you're constantly moving. All you have to do is walk or sprint towards your opponent and then turn away right before you enter their attack range. If they fall for the bait, they should have swung at where you would have been had you kept running in, which gives you a small window to run back in and attack while their attacks are on cooldown. I have a few examples with Rexes doing different things to showcase this. In the first example, you can see that this Rex is running tail attack and is backing himself towards the cliff, but is still letting me get behind him. I use a combination of walking and running approaches to bait out attacks and then immediately take the opening provided to go in and swing myself. If you want to be as safe as possible, only go into attack after you've baited out an attack first, and always exit away from wherever their highest damaging attack is going to land. So for things like Rex, you obviously want to avoid exiting near its head, and for things like Bars and Steg, you want to avoid exiting near their tail. In this next example, these two Rexes were just roaming Grand Plains, which is one of the easiest places to fight Rexes, because there aren't many places around for them to back in and set up. Again, the same strategy applies here. Bait out a tail attack, go in for a hit, and rinse and repeat. Sometimes they'll even pop a bite attack when you're approaching from behind in hopes that you'll shoot past them, which is even better for you because it just makes your approach even more free. In this last example, we have a Rex that's trying to use precise movement against me in tighter terrain around a tree. So I still use the same approach, but this time I'm sprinting circles around him as to stay mobile, so it's a lot harder for him to land a hit. He doesn't seem to be running tail attack, which I realized pretty quickly, which means his flank is completely free unless he stomps. Pouncing is also a great way to get your Raptor Strikes ramped up, but you have to be careful about landing on the front slot. Because as you can see in this clip, I tried to go for the back slot, but ended up attaching to the front slot, which is pretty bad because opponents can easily hit and end up killing you if you land on their front slot. You won't be doing a lot of purely defensive play on Achillo because it's a smaller mid-tier that can't take too many hits, but there are definitely some scenarios when playing defensive can work in your favor, namely against creatures smaller than you that you might have trouble catching. An effective way to play defense on Achillo consists of using a lot of precise movement and walking or running in small, tight circles. In a moment, I'll showcase how these strategies can help land hits on small attackers like Raptors or Struths. For larger dinos, your offense is actually your best defense. It's going to be all about evading and mobility instead of trading hits. Always staying mobile helps keep you safe against larger foes. Using your pounce and kick to evade attacks and get you out of harm's way can also work, but only if you're at full sprint first, otherwise they'll just slow you down. Don't ever, under any circumstance, spam jump to evade hits or other dinos as you run. This will quickly kill your momentum and blow out all your stamina. I would also not recommend using the kick jump pounce combo to get around during fights, as it drains stamina at a much faster rate than just running. Only use this combo when you desperately need to outrun something chasing you, or when you need to quickly catch up to something that you were trying to run down. Here are a few examples of how to combine these defensive tips with offensive strategy to help land hits on small, fast opponents. Playing defensively on Achillo is not too dissimilar to how you might on a larger dino. It mostly consists of precise move rotating and keeping your claws pointed at any incoming attackers. As you can see here, I try to precise move angle myself whenever the Latins come in for hits on me. Queuing up claw attack a little bit ahead of time can actually help when something is taking a pass on you, because you'll actually deal damage throughout the entire animation, which lasts for a little while. If something is going to circle you or take passes, again, precise is going to be your best friend. This Latin decided to circle me here, which is not really a good idea, as it gives me a ton of opportunity to land hits. And you can see I alternate using claws and Raptor Strikes, because the claw attack unfortunately has a longer cooldown, so I'm trying to maximize my damage wherever possible. And again, the precise move rotate strategy is pretty similar to what you would do on a larger dino. Most of the time, you do not want to precise move rotate in full circles because you'll be far too slow and it leaves many openings for you to be hit. So most of the time what you'll end up doing is this precise move wiggle back and forth, which you see me doing here. Achillo's stamina pool is key. The best policy is to never let your stamina drop below a quarter to be safe. Your stamina pool is your lifeline on Achillo, and while it has one of the best for its size, if you let it drop too low during a fight, especially one with a lot of mid and small tiers, you might just be in trouble. Achillo can escape from most opponents by simply jumping up or dropping down cliffs or boulders, so it's always a decent idea to have a place to escape to nearby if things go south. Always maintain enough stamina to reach your escape point if needed. I tend to avoid using caves as escape points on Achillo because I find them too unreliable. It's very easy to get stuck, overwhelmed, or blocked inside of a cave. Rivers and other large obstacles, like gaps between bridges or cliffs, that Achillo can jump across using kick and pounce, also make good escape points because only creatures with a very good jump will be able to follow. Achillo's sense and hide slots are also key in making a successful escape. As I mentioned earlier, Hunter's Instinct will give you a 5% speed boost as soon as you're out of combat, and if you happen to have any bleed or venom, Survival of the Fittest will kick in, making you as fast or faster than 99% of your opponents. As you can see in this clip, I had several megs jump me at once and give chase, but I was able to escape easily with the 10% speed boost I got from their venom combined with the 5% boost from Hunter's Instinct when my combat timer had ended. I was able to put a lot of distance between myself and them before successfully disappearing into the young grove forest to rest. Well, I hope you all found this guide helpful. If you did, make sure to leave a like, I would really appreciate it. This video took me a lot longer than normal to put together, simply because there's a lot more information to break down than what I would normally cover in one video. If you all liked this guide, I'll definitely be doing more of these in the future, and a likely candidate for the next one would be Suko. So as always, I've been your host Conware, thanks for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.